James Emery Paster, born January 30, 1945, and Stephen Albert McCoy, born December 17, 1948, were American serial killers who murdered at least 3 people in Texas between 1980 and 1981. Both were sentenced to death and executed at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas, via lethal injection. Prior to Emery's execution, he confessed to 2 other murders in the Houston area, but he was never tried for either of these killings. McCoy was executed in May 1989, in what was considered a botched execution. Emery was executed a few months later in September 1989. In October 1980, Paster, McCoy, and an acquaintance, Gary LeBlanc, agreed to murder 38-year-old Robert Edward Howard in Houston. Paster was hired by Howard's ex-wife and her new husband, who promised him $1,000 and a motorcycle in exchange for the killing. On October 25, 1980, Paster, accompanied by McCoy and LeBlanc, drove to a nightclub in Houston and slashed the tires of Howard's truck. When Howard returned to his vehicle, Paster approached him from behind and fatally shot him in the back of the head before fleeing. In November 1980, the same trio abducted 27-year-old Diana Trevino Oliver and forced her into their vehicle. She was taken to a field where she was sexually assaulted, then fatally stabbed by McCoy. On December 31, 1980, 18-year-old Cynthia Darlene Johnson was found stranded by the side of the road by the trio. She was taken to a warehouse where she was sexually assaulted by the men. LeBlanc then attempted to kill her by strangling her to death, however, his attempt at killing her failed. Paster then killed her in the early hours of January 1, 1981, by successfully strangling her to death. He then drove a nail up her nose to ensure she was dead. In 1982, Paster received 3 life sentences in Alabama for unrelated crimes, including robbery, assault, robbery in the first degree, and burglary in the first degree. On June 1, 1983, while serving his sentences at Holman Correctional Facility in Alabama, he was indicted for the capital murder of Robert Howard in Houston. Police interviewed Paster at the prison, where they tape-recorded his confession to the murder. On September 21, 1983, Paster was found guilty of capital murder and was sentenced to death the following day for murdering Howard. McCoy, who at the time of the revelation was serving a 5-year sentence in a Texas prison for burglary, was found guilty of capital murder and sexual assault. He was indicted on April 19, 1983, and was found guilty of capital murder on July 26, 1984. He was sentenced to death the following day for murdering Johnson. LeBlanc was also found guilty for his role in the murders and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. He received a lighter sentence in exchange for his testimony against Paster and McCoy. Howard's ex-wife and her new husband were also both found guilty of murder. Each was sentenced to life in prison for their part in the murder of Howard. On May 24, 1989, McCoy was executed via lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas, for the sexual assault and murder of Cynthia Johnson. His execution was considered botched. Witnesses reported that his chest started to heave as the execution began. He also gasped, choked, and then arched his back from the gurney, as the drugs from the lethal injection took effect. One of the witnesses fainted during the execution and reportedly knocked over another witness. The Texas Attorney General, Jim Maddox, later admitted that McCoy seemed to have a somewhat stronger reaction, and that the drugs might have been administered in a heavier dose or more rapidly. McCoy's last meal was a cheeseburger, French fries, and a strawberry milkshake. He made no final statement. In April 1989, Paster and another inmate attempted to escape from prison by squeezing through an air vent and sawing through an exhaust fan. The attempt was unsuccessful after they were caught in a pipe corridor, and they were returned to death row. A few months later, on September 20, 1989, Paster was executed via lethal injection at the Huntsville unit for the capital murder of Robert Howard. Prior to his execution, Paster confessed to murdering 2 other women in the Houston area, but he was never tried for either of the 2 killings. Paster's last meal consisted of steak, salad, French fried potatoes, and watermelon.